Today's class, we will be looking at the hydrogen atom problem. What is the hydrogen atom problem? We would like to solve the Schrodinger's equation for this model system. Actually, this is a real system, so as to understand what are the implications that come out of it. As always, we will start with the time-independent Schrodinger's equation, which says H psi equal to E psi. How are we going to set up the hydrogen atom problem? Is that we go back to the Cartesian space, the right-handed Cartesian space system, where we tend to put the nucleus at the origin of this Cartesian space and the electron at a certain distance r. Unlike the rigid rotor problem where the r is a constant, in this case r could vary, and of course the phase angle with respect to the x-axis will be given as phi, and the angle with respect to the z-axis is going to be theta. Okay, so now this is a two-body problem. I'm sure you guys remember when you have a Hamiltonian that goes as minus h cross square by 2m del square plus u, where this is the total energy that comes up for a system. When you have two bodies, all that one has to do is to convert the mass into reduced mass. This we have seen in the previous lectures. So therefore we are going to adopt the same methodology here. So that therefore the Hamiltonian, which will be given by minus h cross square by 2m, rather 2 mu now, dou square by dou x square plus dou square by dou y square plus dou square by dou z square. Unlike the previous cases where we said there is zero potential, in this case, what is this potential going to be given by? I'm sure we remember it's given by 1 over 4 pi q1 q2 divided by r. So what is q1? The charge on the first particle, and q2 is charge on the next particle. R is the distance between these two particles, and epsilon naught is the permittivity, and so on. So therefore in this system what ends up happening, the potential energy is going to be given by 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught times what is q1? Charge on the proton, so that's going to be E, times q2, that's charge on the electron, that's minus E divided by r. So this results in E square by 4 pi epsilon naught times r. So the important thing one has to see here is that it's a 1 over r dependence on the potential. So far we have only seen cases where the potential was set to 0 because those were ideal cases, but this is a first case that we are looking at a model system, but at the same time there's a real system that is present, and you are able to realize that the potential has a 1 over r dependence in this case. So therefore the full-blown Hamiltonian for the hydrogen atom is going to be minus h cross square by 2m dou square 2 mu dou square by dou x square dou square by dou y square plus dou square by dou z square. Of course in this case we are writing it with respect to r, this u will be present this way, and as we had done earlier, you might remember the Laplacian gets transformed into r theta phi. So let's write it in the polar coordinate system, minus h cross square by 2 mu 1 over r square dou by dou r square dou by dou r plus 1 over r square sine theta dou by dou theta sine theta dou by dou theta plus 1 over r square sine square theta dou square by dou phi square. This is the conversion of Cartesian xyz into r theta phi. This we had seen in a hand wavy form in the rigid rotor itself, minus e square by 4 pi epsilon naught r. So what are we able to see here? We have converted xyz into r theta component and the phi component, and we see that the potential still has an r component that's associated with it. Okay, now let's go into the Schrodinger's equation. When we apply h psi equal to E psi, I'll quickly write the reduced form itself, minus h cross square by 2 mu r square dou by dou r square dou by dou r plus, rather, minus h cross square by 2 mu r square 1 over sine theta dou by dou theta sine theta dou by dou theta plus 1 over sine square theta dou square by dou phi square. The r square is taken out here, so therefore you do not have it. Okay, minus e square by 4 pi epsilon naught r. So if one is able to realize, this will become the moment of inertia I, and this entire component is nothing but L square that we have seen for the rigid rotor problem. So therefore the Hamiltonian gets reduced into the form minus h cross square by 2 mu r square dou by dou r square dou by dou r minus h cross square by 2i L cap square minus e square by 4 pi epsilon naught r. So this is the full-blown Hamiltonian for the hydrogen atom problem. So here we are able to realize that there is an radial part for the kinetic energy, angular part for the kinetic energy, and this is the potential that comes. So basically that is what is the total energy for this given system. Okay, now having done this, what is the next thing that we would like to do is to solve the Schrodinger's equation. So you have h psi equal to E psi, and one is able to appreciate the fact that we have been successful in dividing it into the R portion, which is the radial portion, and this is the angular portion. Yeah, this is the radial part of the kinetic energy, the potential energy, and the angular part. Okay, now when we have this, we would apply h psi equal to E psi again, and if you are able to realize, you have the function as L square, and just in the rigid rotor problem we saw what are the eigenfunctions of L square. We came up with the fact that L square and YLM will give you h cross square L into L plus 1 times YLM. So this indicates YLM is a complete basis for the L square operator. Therefore, if we are able to divide our wave function as the radial part times the angular part, where the angular part is represented as a solution of the spherical harmonics, we will be able to adopt the previous methodologies that we have seen in the class, that is separation of variables, right? The moment you are able to separate it to R and the YLM part, this should be easy to solve. So let's take a look at it now. So what will this reduce to? Minus h cross square by 2 mu r square dou by dou r square dou by dou r minus let's keep it in a way where you have h cross square by 2i L into L plus 1, rather let's keep it capital L square, yeah, minus plus u minus e, right, times psi equal to 0. So all that I have done is to apply h psi equal to E psi with moving the E psi to the left hand side and applying it to the operator that you have seen. So now when you say psi will be given as a product of the radial part and the angular part, you can try to substitute it back in this equation. H cross square by 2 mu r square dou by dou r square dou by dou r. Remember, it will only act on the r part, giving YLM not being acted on it, minus h cross square by 2i. Remember, the L square will only act on the YLM part. So you're going to get L into L plus 1 YLM plus U minus E R times YLM equal to 0. One is able to appreciate the fact that we have YLM common throughout, and YLM cannot be equal to 0 because then it makes it a trivial solution. So therefore what ends up happening, you have this minimized as minus h cross square dou by dou r square dou r by dou r. Uh, minus h cross square by 2i L into L plus 1 so sorry that's minus h cross square, and the final sum that will come up will be plus u minus e times r equal to 0. One is able to see this is a differential equation that's only with respect to r under the function r here. Using the power series method, one will be able to solve it, but similar to the rigid rotor problem, we will not be solving the power series method because the power series method has been introduced to you in the harmonic oscillator problem itself. So we will straight away jump into the solutions. The solution of this will be given such that R and L of R is going to be given by minus n minus L minus 1 the factorial divided by 2n n plus L the whole factorial the power 3 the whole power 1 by 2. Do not worry that it's too complicated. We will see in a moment how this reduces to something that we would like to see. L plus 3 by 2 R power L multiplied by e power minus r n a naught n L plus L 2L plus 1 of the function of 2r n a naught. If you are able to see, the r part is divided into the r power L part. This is a polynomial part. If for a given value of L, we will see what all values L can take with for a given n. This is a part that decays exponentially as a function of r for a these two are constants where n is one of the quantum numbers. These are the Leggever polynomials. In the rigid rotor model, we got Legendre polynomials, and in case of the harmonic oscillator, we saw the Hermite polynomials. So the radial part of the hydrogen atom, when solved, its solution is given by the Leggever polynomials. Of course, this is incomplete without defining what the quantum numbers are. The quantum number n can go from 1, 2, 3 and so on until infinity. And interestingly, when you solve this, this comes up with a constraint that n is greater than L plus 1, which indicates L has to be or less should be equal to less than or equal to n minus 1. So therefore, L takes the values 0, 1, 2 until n minus 1. Okay, so this is the wave function for the radial part. Whenever you have a wave function, you have to associate it with the energy as well. So the energy in this case for En, and it only depends on n, is given by minus mu e power 4 divided by 8 epsilon naught square. Epsilon naught comes from the potential, if you might remember, and n square. And if you might recollect, this is the same energy equation that we saw for the Bohr's model. If you might remember, the Bohr's model was nicely able to explain a lot of concepts of how atoms behave, and that's the same thing that comes up here, which indicates that although Bohr's model has had its own limitations, we are able to appreciate the fact that it is already able to pick up the energy for a given quantum number L, and this can be rewritten as minus e square divided by 8 pi epsilon naught a naught n square. So basically energy still goes as 1 minus 1 over n square, and remember what is a naught here. A naught is given by epsilon naught h cross square, sorry, epsilon naught h square divided by pi mu e square, where mu is the reduced mass, e is the charge of the electron here, and this is the Bohr radius that we had introduced before, right? So now if you are able to see the full-blown equation, you have a naught that is represented. The a naught comes from the fact that you have the Bohr's radius that is being accommodated within this equation. Okay, so now having seen this, we are able to appreciate the fact this is just the radial part, and if you guys might remember what will be the angular part. Actually, even before going to the angular part, why don't we write what are the first few associated Laguerre polynomials. So for n equal to 1 and L equal to 0, you get something like L11 of x, which is going to be equal to minus 1 factorial, you can say, where in this case x is going to be given by 2r divided by n a naught. So therefore in this case x will be 2r by a naught because n takes the value 1. So for value n equal to 2, L can take the value 0 and L can take the value 1. When this takes L, n plus L is going to be 2, and on the top part you have 2L plus 1, so that is going to be 1 of x is going to be given by minus 2 factorial 2 minus x. Okay, these are nothing but the Laguerre polynomials. L22 of, sorry, L33 of x, because you have an n plus L is 3, 2L plus 1, 2 times 1 plus 1 is 3, that will be given by minus 3 factorial. And moving further, for n equal to 3, L, of course, in this case, x will be given by 2r by a naught. In the previous case it was, sorry, 2r by 2 a naught, that will be r by a naught. So L can be 0, L can be 1 and L can be 2. So the solutions here would be L, n plus L, this will be 3, and then L plus 1. So L31, L3, so what is, L43 and L54, L55, because 2 times 2 plus 1 will be 5 of x and of x. This will be equal to minus 3 factorial, 3 minus 3x plus x squared by 2. This will be equal to minus 4 factorial, 4 minus x will be equal to minus 5 factorial times 1. And in this case, x will be equal to 2r by 3 a naught. Yeah, because we have set x equal to 2r by n a naught. So these are the Laguerre polynomials. If you push this back, you will be able to get the polynomial part of the solution of the hydrogen atom. So why don't we write the full solution of the hydrogen atom? So you're going to have psi of r comma theta comma phi, which is going to be given by RNL times YLM. It's an important aspect to understand here. The radial part depends on the quantum numbers L and M, while the angular part depends upon the quantum number L and M. And while we were solving in this case, we were able to see that L square is greater or equal to M. So similarly in this case you are able to realize L is less than or equal to N minus 1. So this relates the three quantum numbers, the principal quantum number L, the azimuthal quantum number L, and the magnetic quantum number M together. I'm sure this would have been known to you from your high school, but now we are able to see how does this arise organically when you solve the Schrodinger's equation. Okay, now having done that, of course I am not writing the full equation for R and L and YLM, and you guys might remember YLM was given by an equation that looked of this sort, where you had YLM will be given by I to the power of M plus mod M, where M is the magnetic quantum number, times 2L plus 1 by 4 pi times L minus mod M factorial by L plus mod M factorial, the whole power half. And then comes the Legendre polynomials, associated Legendre polynomials, PL mod M of cos theta e power im phi. Okay, here we are able to see what are the values of L that constrains the values of M. Okay, now having understood this, why don't we go forward and see a few more things. Let's say we just want to regard ourselves with the radial part. We can always dissociate the radial and the angular part so that we understand each one of them separately, and put together we'll be able to enhance our understanding. So in case of the radial part, if you want to integrate over a given space, or rather the full space, in order to normalize it, you need to normalize between 0 and infinity. As I said, unlike the rigid rotor problem where the R is fixed, in this case the R can go from the nucleus until infinity. So basically there could be a probability for the electron to be present at infinity as well, but of course the probability is going to be infinitesimally small, and this will be given by the integrand dr times r square times RNL star times RNL will be equal to 1. So this is basically the normalization that goes through. Of course, we had written with the normalization constant in the generic equation. And of course, when you want to write psi altogether, so this is how it's going to look. 0 to 2 pi d phi, 0 to pi sine theta d theta, 0 to infinity r square dr times psi star of r theta phi times psi of r theta phi is equal to 1, right? And whenever you are having different sets of equations that will come, that will lead to orthonormality, and one is able to appreciate the fact that these end up coming because whenever you had to integrate over all space, you have something like 0 to infinity in the Cartesian, 0 to infinity, 0 to infinity, you have a dx, dy, dz that gets converted to each of this form. Yeah. So now having done this, let's also look at the orthonormality. Whenever you have eigenfunctions that come from Hermitian operators, then each of the solutions are orthogonal to one another. So basically 0 to 2 pi d phi integrand 0 to pi sine theta d theta, 0 to infinity r square dr, then you have psi n prime L prime M prime star R theta phi times psi n L m R theta phi will be given by the Kronecker deltas n n prime, Kronecker delta L L prime, Kronecker delta M M prime. Okay, so this is how the orthonormality is given, in which case each of these is the Kronecker delta that we are trying to look at. Okay, now having understood this, why don't we write some of the solutions of the hydrogen atom? Okay, so here I'm going to try to resort to something where we can understand things a little easier. We constrain boxes so that I can write things in a probable way which might help you understand. So let's start with the first one. Let's say n equal to 1, so therefore L value is 0 and M value is 0. In such a case, what ends up happening? This will be given as psi 100 function. And in this case, the answer will be, the normalization is going to be 1 over square root of pi. Remember, this also takes care of the angular part times z over a naught power 3 by 2 e power minus sigma. The sigma, we will once again define what we are trying to write there, and the angular part is 1. You might remember y00 is nothing but a value 1. Yes, so z is nothing but the charge that's present in the proton. So you're looking at hydrogen like systems where, let's say, you take helium He plus, you will be talking about Zs2, and lithium plus 2 as Zs3 and so on, right? So when you have something like that, and then Z will be given by R, Cr by A naught. Okay, so this will help minimize or simplify the equations further. And the first thing that one has to remember is that the psi 100 has R power 0 dependence and E power minus R by A naught dependence only. Okay, then let's go to the next one, n equal to 2. N equal to 2 can have values of L equal to 0 and M equal to 0. In this case, you have something like 1 over 32 pi, right? Z by A naught power 3 by 2, 2 minus sigma E power minus sigma by 2. You are able to see here that although we did not introduce an n there, the n part is coming as sigma over 2, and this is sigma power 1, basically R power 1 dependence that comes. If you remember the equation we wrote earlier, we had an R power 1 dependence that we had. So for instance, we had R power L dependence. Now R by A naught is taken into a factor because there's an power L here. So therefore, this helps us simplify this equation. And what is the angular part? It still remains 1 because you have a y00 here and a y00 here. Okay, having seen this, let's go to the next equation. Next one is 1 by square root of 32 pi. times z by a naught power 3 by 2. The z by a naught power 3 by 2 keeps coming. Sigma times sigma power minus sigma by 2. Of course, this will remain constant for n equal to 2 case, right? Now that what will end up happening, we are having a y, sorry, this is y 0, 0. So now we are looking at L equal to 1, M equal to 0. Yeah, that's the part that you're trying to look at. So this is going to be y1, 0, right? So what is this part? That contributes to a cos theta, if you might remember. I'm making a mistake here. No, no, no. That's going to be a 1 again. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, no, it's right. It's going to get contribute to a cos theta. If you might remember, y10 will have an x term that remains. So that's what we are ending up seeing here. On the other hand, when you have L equal to 1 and M equal to plus minus 1, a normalization constant becomes 1 over 64 pi z by a naught power 3 by 2. You have something similar, sigma times e power minus sigma by 2. Now sine theta ends up being the component. Of course, there is also an m component, that will be plus minus I phi. We are talking about y mod y1 plus minus 1. So we are starting to able to understand what the solutions of the hydrogen atom problem are, including the radial part and the angular part. And both put together helps you understand the solution for the hydrogen atom problem. So as we go further in this lecture, we will be trying to understand what different features that we can extract from the wave function. For instance, we keep trying to say in quantum chemistry that the wave function has all information. So we will try to understand yet again, okay, what does this YLNLM has in itself? What is that we can understand? Can we ask what is the most probable distance at which we can find an electron? Actually, yes, that is the whole purpose of this endeavor, because you would like to understand when you have a wave function and if you can determine where is the most likely place where you can find the electron, then you try to understand the system and possibly the chemistry that is associated with it. And as you're able to see, I'm already alluding to the fact that these wave functions have an physical understanding as the orbitals that will end up coming. However, I slightly introduced the fact that the Bohr's model already was able to explain the energy. So the energy component is nothing new. This was already known. Of course, Bohr restricted the electron within an orbit. We'll soon try to see whether the orbital also does the same thing or does it do something else. And one is able to appreciate the fact the moment you have an e power minus r by n a naught, as r goes to infinity, e power minus infinity goes to something like 0. So therefore, you realize that as you go very farther away from r, irrespective of the function you're looking at, irrespective of n, irrespective of what is the n and l value, you realize that as you go farther and farther away, this goes to 0. Okay, so this already defeats the concepts of orbitals, but of course, we will take a lot more time in discussing what will this y, n, l and m give us. Thank you.